but we'll fix it. So I can begin. As we said, I don't see the audience, I only see my presentation, but I want to thank for the invitation to this event. It happened in a special way how I got to speak here. First we worked with Maria Babkina. We had together a project in Germany, a project that was busy with introduction of a plain language and rules of a plain language. How in plain German you can formulate the basic things. And so we worked with Maria together in a group, and then we started another project. And it was a project about subtitles. And that's where I started doing what I'm putting on the screen now. And we're talking about speech to... So we're talking about stenographers or captioners or speech-to-text operators. I have never yet talked to an international crowd and like with this camp, but let's try it the first time. So right now I will present myself, what I do for a living, how I got my education. I started as a salesperson in a company, just the regular way for many people, and my family was busy there, so I started working in that area. And then I started working with written translation and namely translation as captioning. So you know probably sign language. Everybody knows sign language, but speech-to-text operator is a special kind of translator for a sign language, but this is a language translation for people with language with hearing impairment and deaf people. So I practiced this since 2004. I first was an assistant at our local government, and this is where I first got into contact with people with hearing impairment. After 2007, I started working as a staff speech-to-text translator, and this is where I got my first work experience. In 2010, I founded a company with another partner in business, and that company, for me, it was about a company that I ended working with in 2016. And since 2016, I've been working as a freelancer. So I did some more education ever since. And in 2014, for instance, I learned another degree in translating for deafblind. And then I worked and I learned plain language skills in another university, and then I've learned some skills and got a degree in stenography. So that was a little bit of information about me. Who is the target audience? Who needs speech-to-text translation at all? So mostly it's people with hearing impairments and those who had hearing impairments since childhood through trauma or a disease where hearing got impaired and damaged or significantly was significantly inferior ever since. So they need assistance in perceiving speech. The next category that I work with is deaf people, and the deaf people use our services. Mostly they are helped by sign language interpreters. because they learn sign language as their mother tongue in the childhood. And since 2002, the sign language is appreciated and used as an official language, and that's where interpreters work. But some of the deaf people, they don't use sign language. They grew up, let's say, in a family where people spoke rather than used sign language, and so they need assistance capturing speech, just spoken word. And such people, of course, use the services of speech-to-text translators or stenographers. Next target audience that we can be of help for people who need plain language or simplified language. It's, again, people with hearing impairments. They, let's say, have more problems using German language, and they have lesser vocabulary or smaller vocabulary than we have in a normal life. Again, people with trauma impairing their hearing abilities, and different other people. It can also be people who just come to a new land having no language skills whatsoever. And also people who simply did understand language before, but again through trauma or aging or other reasons have lesser ability to perceive German language and interpret it for themselves. But the task of a speech-to-text interpreter, or translator rather, is to be in the situation and just writing down everything that's been said. The first challenge is basically word for word writing down what's been said, because as I said, if you can't write everything together, you write a summary and then you translate the summary, and they have to be ready to read. It's important to write in a compact form and maintain the grammar properly. Then, of course, punctuation is needed. I started measuring how fast can I do it. That's what's important for me, to make it fast so that I can manage punctuation if I need it. And that was oh, by the way, I remembered something more. For instance, we have an interesting example in my network. I work with one interpreter, a sign language interpreter, who is deaf herself. And the sign language interpreters, they have a benefit among their deaf people, because they have their mother language, mother tongue, and a sign language. But if they need to translate something in a written form, they may not have the skill. And so we are in the situation, we are writing down. Maybe they use a beamer, or they are given a specific equipment like a laptop to read it all. And then we also do it online. Or there's also a possibility that they get a task and they need an assistant. They need some assistance. So those are the possibilities where we can work, where we can be of use. And it's also a great example where a deaf person uses the services of speech-to-text interpreter or translator. There is an education for us as professionals, and as I started out.
So I started in 2004. At that time, there were no training opportunities. I had to get trained in special courses, then I had to pass an exam, but this came later, and when I started, such opportunities were closed. I would say that this situation was common for entire Germany. There were not so many speech-to-text interpreters, translators at that time. So in 2020, the situation started changing, but it changing very slowly. So in the meantime, there are some opportunities. One can get certified if one is willing to become speech-to-text interpreter, but previously it is important to get the appropriate training and pass the exam. There are commercial providers, they offer such training opportunities, and sorry, let me think a couple of minutes. So there are two of them, two commercial providers, and additionally there is a private academy. It is based in Munich. I worked there as a trainer. I have to train speech-text translators. And it is also possible to get trained as a foreign language speech-to-text translator. Additionally, there is a so-called German Association of people with hearing impairment. This is an organization that offers some training, and at the moment it is possible to get certified by them. Especially at the time of Corona, their offer range has expanded, and this private academy also offers some online courses, unlike these commercial providers. So the training includes in particular knowledge about hearing impairments, about various types of impairment, about legislation, the regulation, the translating techniques, and the private academy offers also conventional methods of translation and special techniques. The commercial providers offer only conventional methods of translation, and the German Association of Hearing Impaired offers also only conventional methods of speech-to-text rendering. After the training, one has to pass the state exam. Personally, I did not pass this exam because at the time it was not available, and when I started doing this, I did not use speech-to-text interpreter as my core activity. So for this reason, I did not pass this exam. Maybe sometime later I will use this opportunity. So as I have already mentioned, there are several writing systems or recording systems. Let's say there are three of them. So here you see a so-called machine-assisted stenography. With this keyboard, one can render speech to text, but the keyboard is not the most important thing. The most important thing is the software which is integrated there, and such a keyboard has a big disadvantage. If one has not trained in Germany in the German language, then it would be impossible to use it. And previously in Germany, there were just two courses where you could get trained in using this keyboard, and now the modern speech-text interpreters are not being trained in such a machine-assisted stenography. So no training opportunities, therefore this method is not included into exams. So you cannot get trained in using this keyboard anymore.
So the black ones are syntagmas, and the gray ones are the vowels and the rest of the words. And so the whole thing works like you play in chords on a musical instrument, an accordion, let's say. So you play simultaneously in a couple of keys, and the complete sentence appears on the screen. So we were trained let me remember, my colleague used this keyboard for a year before the license expired. And because the license of this thing is very high. And I know that they bought another new system and it cost 7,000 euro. So it's pretty expensive. But the benefit of this keyboard is because it's very quiet. I've seen how you press different keyboards, and these ones are treading on feathers, as we say. It's very quiet. You can hear nothing if you press these keys. And that's important because for people with hearing impairments, they have a big problem with different noises around. And the problem was that they at least need to hear something, or at least read some speech from the lips or from the screen, and that's how you help them. And if somebody's pressing these noisy keys on the keyboard, that adds another problem for the concentration of their attention. And so that constitutes a problem. But as I said, there were these keyboards available, but for a year, it takes you a year to start using it properly, to learn it. And my colleague there worked with it for 4 years before she started fluently using it. Then speech recognition. Speech recognition has become a symbol of this headset for some reason. You know, there are some companies who provided education for speech recognition system and private academies also. So what you do is you dictate something into a system and you train this speech recognition system with your voice and speech flexions. And so the recognition is getting better and better as you keep using it. And of course, in quite a short time, the system can learn a lot. There is a market for these systems, but not many are accepting it. And because people use text appearing on a screen. And if you are a quick reader or slow reader, you can get problems for different speech of reading from the screen. So not many people like it, but still these systems are used. This is the method that I'm using, which is a conventional method. And for me, it's also a keyboard that I operate. But there's another principle: to recognize everything that's been said and pass it over via keyboard. And for this purpose, I use shortenings or redactions or shortened versions of words. So I think about that, like how can I shorten or redact a word, and then I can recognize as fast as possible if it pops up on the screen, and I don't need the customer to notice that I'm having this. The customer now needs to say the word quickly, and I must recognize it quickly. So that means my attention is my tool, and that's where I am very similar or not dissimilar to stenography. So there are programs to help us doing this task. There's a conventional method of redactions that you can read and write, and you can learn it. There's an auto hotkey. Oh, there's also auto text as a module in Word, Microsoft Word, or OpenOffice, or LibreOffice. So these are the possibilities for you to, well, of course, some templates for friendly greeting. It's also there from the beginning, but they added a lot of more word combinations. But I quickly reach my own limits with this kind of system. Because I cannot spare different topics, vocabularies. There's another option, which is auto hotkey. It's a free software, it's a freeware. It's an open source program.
So I've tried this software, but I do not trust unless I first try it out. So I've tried the auto hotkey to realize whether the programmers are not too superficial. So in fact, it turns out that it doesn't matter what program you are using. The matter is how you use this reduction system. So the same can be said about the phrase express. It is possible to to share the screen. But again, I've got the limits regarding the topics and vocabulary. And I often have to travel for various events. For instance, this week I was in a vocational school, and they trained some measuring engineering, and I had to help people with disabilities. I worked there several weeks. I worked with a man. He was trained in a profession, he got trained to get so to say religious occupation, and he a diacon, as we can call it, and he also needed assistance because he was hearing impaired. So this was my recent experience, and I also work with some big groups of people, not individual, with the customers. For instance, during one religious festival for ecumenical church, I had to spend there a full day, and I rendered speech to text during this festival, whatever was said. And it was the event on site. People got the assistance at the time of participation. And, at the same time, these services were streamed online. In 2015, for instance, I also participated in a church day. It was Church Day 2015, and provided the same services for a big group of people. So these are possible ways of application of speech-to-text translators. And as I have already mentioned, I use the system of reduction or the system of shortcuts. As I started in 2007, I finished working as sales assistant, and then I arrived in the new profession. I had to complete my internship, and I had to explore, so to say, new boundaries, because I reached my limits very quickly. And I've decided to change the profession, because otherwise it didn't make any sense. And I worked together with an engineer. He was a pensioner, but he had a hobby. He constructed the keyboards. And actually, he produced my favorite prototype of the keyboard for speech-to-text rendering. And also, he dealt with the reduction, with the shortening. So he instilled the desire into me to work with such things. So I often have to answer the question, how did I start using these shortcuts, and when should I need doing this actually, and how can I produce these shortcuts, these abbreviations, these abridgments? What should I focus on actually? Should I use any system, or I do it spontaneously? And how can I learn these abbreviations after I have produced them? How can I assign them to the keys, because I have to use the keyboard at a very high tempo? And I, of course, have a certain order for these shortcuts. This is the order which correlates with the letter order. And of course, another frequent question is how to deal with the mistakes, with the errors. So what if I wrote something wrong? So actually, this was the end of my official part of the presentation, and I would like to show you directly how I work. Sorry, hold on a second. I do not see anything on the screen at the moment, so okay. So let me check just a second. I'm so sorry. For some reason, I cannot share my screen. I have to check what's the problem. Okay. Okay, now. There we are. So can you see my screen now? Please let me know. Tell me something. Okay, right. So this is the phrase express. This is the program I work with. And you do not see too much because actually I have recently made some order in my folders, and now you can see the topics I work with. So you see the list is quite impressive, quite long. It's an alphabetic order, as you may see. And I also use colors to highlight some topics. I assign colors to the topics. I use these colors to be easy to find the topics when I need them. So this is my personal search system. And I can also type the title to find. Here you see the most frequent words that turn up very frequently. And I also make the list of very long words, especially long words. And what are the longest words? I do not use them because maybe they are not the most frequently used words. I prefer shorter words, so to say. So here you see, for instance, let me type something in. So let me type in the word East. Ist. In German language, this is a very common word. And this is the form of the word to be, but there are also commonly used articles, and these are the words that turn up very frequently. So, but we still need some shortcuts. Let me check whether I can find something interesting for you. How can I demonstrate the search mode? So this is the folder where I keep very common words. You see there are over 2,400 text blocks here. And you can find whatever here. Politics, when I have to render about politics, church-related topic, school-related topic, various collective meeting for the groups of workers, or accounting. It might be that there is a conversation dedicated to accounting, and I also can be helpful in this case. So here, by the way, we can combine the topics by combining various folders.
There's a teacher who works in a school for autistic children and children with hearing impairments. And right now I activated the folder school and the folder hearing impairments, and also to put to this list the general folder, general vocabulary. And of course, I must have all the shortcuts in my memory. So right now we work in a couple of translators, and that doesn't mean that we changed after an hour of work. But I don't know how in different other countries they work with sign language, but we change every 15 minutes. And if it's my turn, and I notice that one word has fallen out, I don't know it, then I give a sign to my colleague and she or he writes it. That doesn't bother them. And we have just developed this procedure, and we work very well in a pair. So that was the program, the software that we use. Let me think what else was there on the screen. Let me see. Not that thing. Let me manage my windows now. So can you see now the window with writing? So that's the writing window. Of course, it's not a normal situation for my job where I have to manage several screens plus the translation process, but I will just write now how a normal person would just say something. How can we start now and then continue? So it does seem to work. That's similar to the speed that a regular speech-to-text translator works with. Maybe there can be a faster speed, of course. So what shortcuts have I used? The word can or können in German, these are two languages. These are two letters that I have to press in a combination. The word jetzt, which is now in German, is JT, this combination of letters. Anfangen, which is begin in German, this letter combination. Und dann, this is and then, so two words, and I have two options. I can type this word combination if I type U for und and dn for dann. But und dann is used frequently together. So I created another combination for myself, udn, because it's a frequent word combination. So I could use U for und. Sorry for this to be slow now, but I'm just explaining. Und dann, this is UD or the UDN combination. The word gleich, which is right now, and then weiter, WT, and then machen is MC. And the word wahrscheinlich, which is obviously. So it's basically the same as with the word by and done. S is the letter for the word das, or IS for combination is das. So if you use this combination for done again, and the word schon already SN. So you can see that this sentence appeared quite quickly. So in Ordnung, there's another shortcut, but I was too lazy to create my own, so I used the existing one, IO. So there are word combinations that are frequently used. So in German, for instance, you use all the time this phrase, auf jeden Fall, in any case. So if it's a frequent combination, then you can use A and F, just two letters. So that's how we basically work in a normal language situation. But also, I'm trying to remember what windows have I opened and they're sticking there. So, for instance, yesterday we were in the city of Karlsruhe. And so in German cities and towns, if I read the street signs, we have our own system. And a funny thing happened to me. I was a participant in an event in Köln, and they used, and it was a barrierless event, and so they had a speech-to-text translator there. And I was sitting there, and I just looked to the left. Oh yeah, I see they're sitting the speech-to-text captioner or translator. I'm still managing screens, sorry. Seems to be working. And so I looked at the translator, and I see how they use these shortcuts and when they don't. And with these shortcuts, I think to myself, you somehow remember all them, right? But if you knew them better, then you can work with a different colleague, like me. But we don't have the matching system of shortcuts. And then the event was at the end. We met with each other with this colleague, Carmen, at the end of the evening. And I took her system of shortcuts. She likes to use English words, for instance, a lot for shortcuts. And then I learned something for myself. Quite a useful meeting that was. So this ends basically my part of the presentation. So if there are questions, I would be so glad, because normally I don't like monologues or speakers who just speak and don't facilitate dialogue. So questions?
Do you have questions? But please answer them only in English or Deutsch.
Guten Tag, danke sehr, das war sehr interessant.
Hello, thank you for interesting presentation. I have a question. How did coronavirus and pandemic changed your work? Has it become less or more work, and have new methods emerged ever since? Yeah, coronavirus changed our industry a lot, our work a lot. Like the previous year, 2020, like on 10th or 20th March, we still had some jobs booked in my calendar, but they disappeared overnight, and it lasted up into the autumn. And we often all freelancers. We don't work as staffers. There are some staff speech-to-text translators, but it's an existential question. What if you don't have any more jobs coming your way if you're a freelancer? So first 2 months, as I said, collected stamps, as we joke about finding extra cash wherever we can. So it was quite a depressive time. And then I called my colleague and I said, look, it cannot be like this. We have to do something. And people with hearing impairments still need our assistance regardless of the pandemic. We're just sitting on our chairs at home. And so we started thinking back and forth, tried different things, different tools. And we have some 5 or 4 tools that we work with. And we give the links. We send these links to our customers, and these customers get into a video conference or video call. They hear things like that, and I send them a text link, and they can read the spoken word also in that other link. We can also work with a very interesting tool, which is subtitles in Zoom, through a API token. We have done that just recently, but there's a bad thing in it. You only see 2 or 3 lines on a screen, and they just keep stacked up, and you don't read that quickly. And another bad thing is that subtitles disappear quickly. And there was a colleague who is that sign language interpreter. She is deaf, and she had great problems to read it and then translate it into sign language. So it didn't run as fast as we used to, and we didn't like it at the moment, but still it can be used. What we also can do, there's a small program. You have to install it on your computer or app, and then you can use the tool, which can merge together different texts in a conference cloud or something, but the customer has to arrange everything. And then there are problems with the type size, with the contracts, with installation of the whole program, and the customers have these problems, so we decided we better leave it be for now. So it all boils down to what can you trust as in terms of technology to last at least an hour of translation. So yes, our job has changed a lot. You asked me about changing through pandemic, and events on location through lockdowns were completely banned. And we kept working online all the time. In Germany, it's very stringent. So right now, there are hybrid events, like you probably also have. Like in autumn 2020, people noticed, well, it doesn't go so quickly, the whole corona thing, so let's do something, at least hybrid things. So they started doing hybrid events. And I received another opinion. If you book another event and you don't know for sure whether it comes along or not, then we can still use an online version instead of hybrid, and we still do that. So it's 50-50. But still, the incidence has grown quite a lot overall in Germany, and by 10%. And so far, the location on-site events are still permitted, but we're seeing that the country moves in another direction. Fortunately, we still can use it, and we can help the people with hearing impairments.
Any more questions? No, thank you.
Guten Tag, Anja. I would like to ask you,
Good afternoon, Anja.
machine translation is likely to replace humans, speech-to-text translators soon, or alternatively, is machine translation likely to improve significantly in the near future?
So, I would not underestimate the role of machines. People with hearing impairments perhaps cannot be that independent, but for machines, we see this changes, this progress in Germany, this influence of the artificial intellect, of AI, and this, by the way, started in Bundestag, in our parliament. We get more and more advanced with the software. So, so Bundestag is used as a software. Okay, and we for some events we need 3 speech-to-text interpreters, and they have to work to check the rendering of the machine translation. We need technical opportunities, and I don't think that machines will completely substitute or replace the interpreters, because the manual checks are still required. So machines people cannot read too much text, and this is a too big cognitive load. From the cognitive point of view, it's too overwhelming. And the task of the person is to simplify the speech, to adapt the speech, to produce, to facilitate the proofreading. Regarding my personal occupational experience, translators exist not only to render the speech to text, not only to write, they also have to validate the situations on the spot. And the machines cannot react in the situation, especially such situations, exams. So I am, if I am present during some exam, it is very important for the people with hearing impairment. Previously, when I was not present, when the interpreter is not present, people with the hearing impairments were not confident. They worried about understanding the task, the assignment properly. So, of course, the speech-to-text interpreter is an additional factor which instills some confidence into people with the impairment, and I think that this is another important role for them. So, to summarize, I think that in the long-term prospect, machine translation will replace people in many aspects, but there are some niche in which it is not possible that fast.
You have mentioned a tool. What's the name of the tool? For the tool for online writing or quick writing? There are different tools. Online writing, all right. So TBL Communicator, it's a small tool from a German developer. And so that's a steno mask. You write, when you speak in a mask, and then the system translates it. But the tool that I work with is text on top. It's called text on top. It's a development from the Netherlands. And they have all kinds of options there. They have an option for your presence on location, for online translation, and they have technical assistance, and you can always ask someone, and they give you support. Because sometimes I don't have time for that, but then somebody new comes in and says, I did ask about this. So customer support is great. So text on top is the name. There are 2 variants of it. The one is for your location presence, and the online text on tap. text on top is for locations, but the same developer and the basic program is the same.
Hallo, danke für die Gespräche. Ich habe eine Frage.
I have a question. We talked about the system of shortcuts. Is the same system used in other German-spoken?
Sie haben gesprochen, dass Sie haben
So the question is whether the shortcuts that you use are used and understood in other German-speaking languages, like Austria and Switzerland. Austria and Switzerland are also using those shortcuts, but every translator builds a system of shortcuts for him or herself. There are two groups, though, that companies try to organize it. So I was a trainer in these two systems myself. But you still need to adjust the system for yourself, for your convenience. Like, for instance, if I say the word wahrscheinlich, which is obvious, or how can I memorize and shortcut this word? So I would say BS, or VS, WS. And you would say, no, it's not enough for me. WS, I don't notice that. That's for me water or Wasser in German, VS. So two translators may not agree. And another one says, I would rather pin it to the letter L. And I would say, okay, it's your job to adjust the shortcut system to your liking, to your convenience. So every translator has to develop the system. There are some templates, but then you have to think, what and when would you like to shortcut? And many begin with first shortcutting the longest words. But then the problem is that if I'm now trying to there is a BTHG. This is a shortcut for a law, a German law. So if this word combination is really frequent in my speeches that I translate, I should better pin it to a shortcut. There was a school, and then somebody says PTKG, and they don't use this word. But there is the one instance of the word still. And then I was in an event around the topic of people with impairments and special needs. And then also the word was used, but only once or twice. So if there are words that I'm not using frequently, I still have a problem somehow to shortcut them. For instance, for a couple of years, I work constantly with psychology, and I have worked with a psychologist, and I have to learn a lot of professional vocabulary. For instance, like to smile to sleep, or laugh to sleep. I don't have that shortcut. I have to see what's in the active vocabulary. But in the word ist, that verb, of course they are your basic stones of every speech, like to be and so on. And in Austria and Germany, Austria also have the speech to text translators. They are doing the same way. A lot of them work with AutoHit and Face Express. Face Express is another program that they use. The benefit of AutoHotkey is that it's free. Face Express requires a license, and I had to wait a little bit till an update comes out, and then I purchase the license again. It's not that expensive, but still you have to spend some time. I like it because it allows me to sort the words everywhere and the way I want. So everybody works differently, but in effect, everybody's using shortcuts. That's what we all share, shortcuts.
Thank you very much, Anja. It was very insightful.